So probably the most overlooked and underrated positional group in fantasy football would be the offensive line. Every year we go in talking about QBs, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, but we do not spend enough time looking at offensive line groups. If we take the time to look at these groups, it will help determine the real possibility and outcomes that we can expect from all of our positional players that we actually draft in fantasy football. All right, so I wanted to make the video pretty short, sweet, quick, and to the point, just for the fact that number one, I don't know if people really are interested in this content when it comes to fantasy football. So how did I rank the teams and kind of like what metrics did I use? Well, I used some of the standard ones of pass block win rate, run block win rate. I looked at offensive line rankings, offensive player rankings, tried to compile all that data, looked at the additions, departures from these teams, whether it's in the draft, free agency. I did also use the performance for the offensive line units over the last month of the season to kind of try and weight that, because obviously some of the other metrics are like season long, so it's a little bit harder to weigh that season versus how are they performing at the end of the season. So I kind of did throw that in there as well to kind of like help this balance out a little bit more correctly. So basically trying to take all this data, all this information, compile it into a data set and kind of just determine who I thought was going to do the best. I tried to remove the scheme, the players that are outside of the offensive line away, because that's what I'm worried about is the star players that I'm kind of missing the point of the exercise. So without further ado, I'm going to hop right into it. At number 10, we have the Minnesota Vikings. Last year, they started off pretty decent at the offensive line. Midway through the season, though, it wasn't looking very good. Obviously, about midway through the season, they did lose Christian Darrisaw. It was after that the offensive production started to go down and down and down. And overall, like the performance for the offense as a whole for the Vikings just wasn't on the same level. You kind of saw as the season progressed that Sam Darnold was getting pressured more and more. Their pressure percentage was pretty worrisome, pretty high. So it was something that I was a little concerned about. There is a positive note that they did add a couple players in free agency to this team that I think will kind of like help buff up this offensive line and set them up to be pretty successful going into the next season. I think we also do have to hope that Christian Darrisaw comes back, that he comes back healthy and playing at the same level he was before. Holistically, I think that putting them at number 10 is pretty fair. Had Darrisaw not gone down and had the team still made the same additions going into this year, I think they would have been closer to maybe a top 5, 6, 7 offensive line. But because of his injury and because of the additions and not necessarily knowing how they're going to perform on the field yet, taking a little bit of a modest take on them and putting them overall at number 10. So at number 9, we have the Arizona Cardinals. It's kind of fun to talk about the Arizona Cardinals only because I don't really feel like people really thought their offensive line was anything too spectacular. Last year, they were set up in a very good spot. At the end of the season, the Cardinals' pressure rate was 11th and the sack rate was 18th, which was pretty decent, all things considered. Especially since Kyler really loves to hold on to the football, especially when he's being blitzed. Arizona's offensive line really held up very, very, very well. Whether they're running the ball, passing the ball, their metrics kind of started to slowly creep up throughout the season. The positive thing, too, to say about Arizona is when they were facing 4 or fewer rushers, their line was excellent. They were 5th in pressure rate and 2nd in sack rate. They also did really, really well at making things easier for James Conner, which we could kind of see as the season went on is that people kind of like had expected him to kind of fall off the cliff, but it definitely looked like their offensive line was opening up some good holes for him to run through. And obviously that makes it a lot easier for James Conner to perform at a much higher level. The other big thing for the Arizona Cardinals, obviously, is they did make some additions and some re-signings on the offensive line as well. We should see a miniature step up. Again, I'm not going just off of where they finished last year. We're also trying to predict where they're going to finish in 2025. So I think with those additions and the performance they were already putting out, especially towards the end of the season, really was at a high level. I think the Cardinals are really set up to do well this coming season. Again, maybe a slightly more modest prediction than some people would have out there, but I do have the Arizona Cardinals at number 9. So coming in at number 8, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. It is kind of weird because for Kansas City, like on the tape, they didn't look like they played very well. I think a lot of that was their right tackle was a really, really big issue, and so was their left tackle to some extent. It just on tape did not look all that great. I do believe that, again, with Andy Reid as the head coach of this football team, that they are going to take a major step up this coming season. They rank top 10 for both against the blitz as well as for pressure rate given up. Obviously, it does help that Patrick Mahomes usually gets the ball out pretty quick, but still, those two categories they did pretty significantly well in. So it does seem like it is more of, like I said, like a tackle issue. And like I said, I believe that they addressed that in free agency in the draft. So I do anticipate they're going to be taking a big step up moving forward. I know that a lot of people would have them later down on their rankings. And if you know me at all, which you probably don't if you're watching on YouTube, you would know I'm not a huge Kansas City fan. So I'm not going to be propping them up just because they're Kansas City, but I'm also not going to be knocking them just because they're Kansas City, just looking at the data and trying to rank people based on the data. So I'm hoping, again, with the free agency additions, with drafting correctly, and some of the highlights that they had last season, again, even if it didn't look beautiful all the time, I'm hoping that the improved performance coming into next season will be there, and they will finish as a top 10 offensive line unit in the NFL next season. At number 7, I have the Detroit Lions. Obviously, in the middle of the season, they weren't playing really well as a unit, which is kind of surprising considering the amount of investment that Detroit has in their offensive line. Their biggest problem, though, was against higher competition teams. The performance for the offensive line overall did dramatically go down when they played playoff teams, which we did also see actually in the playoffs themselves. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, are they more like the Dallas Cowboys defense where they beat the living crap out of teams that are bad teams? But when it comes to them playing good teams or good competition, they just can't rise to it and still play at that level of consistency. The Lions ranked 12th in pass block win rate and 16th in run block win rate, so obviously it was pretty respectable. The Lions ranked 7th in pressure rate and 5th in sack rate, so again, pretty good in those categories as well. It did seem like they did very well against the blitz. They kind of like stood out. I don't know if it's based on situation and the scheme that Ben Johnson had set up and kind of knowing what was going to be coming from different defensives. I do believe for Detroit, they are going to be able to take a slight step forward. I do also believe that there's going to be a higher focus on the run for this team. So because of the fact that they do very, very well in running the ball, my guess would be that they're going to have a much easier time pass protecting for Jared Goff because of the fact of the focus of defenses to stop this running onslaught that I anticipate the Lions to have next year. So that is why I very easily, very comfortably have them at number 7 overall for offensive line. I would like to put them a tad bit higher. Again, on tape, they looked a little bit better, but looking at all the data and the metrics and, like I said, trying to remove my own bias of what I see on tape, I have to put them at number 7. So at number 6, I have the Buffalo Bills. I would like, again, like the Lions, would like to rank them a little bit higher. The issue that I have is that their last month of the season, they just didn't perform at the same peak level that they had through the majority of the season, which, again, I know the last month should not be the necessarily most important thing to consider, but it is a heavily weighted factor because what I see at the end of the season could very well be likely what I'm going to get at the beginning of next season, along with the additions that they make. So for the Bills, they were top 10 in pressure rate allowed, and they were number 1 overall for sack rate in the NFL. So again, they were statistically amazing in those two areas. They only allowed a pressure rate of about 30%, and when the Bills offensive line was facing the blitz, they allowed roughly about a 30 to 31% pressure rate. So again, pretty superb, pretty high up there as far as offensive lines go in the NFL. The biggest reason also that I have to kind of bump the Bills a little bit is because Josh Allen is a huge reason why they're not taking sacks and a huge reason why they're able to hold up, quote unquote, a little bit better than some other teams that have a little bit less mobile quarterbacks. He does bail them out of situations, not only against the blitz, but in general, maybe their blocking didn't hold up for that particular play. So I kind of have to, as negative as it sounds, like I said earlier, people want to weigh the quarterback and weigh the weapons in favor of the offensive lines. I kind of have to take that away from them instead of giving it to them. The other big thing for me too is I don't really feel like their run blocking unit was quite as good as it could have been. So when it came to running the ball, I don't know if it's more of James Cook or if it is really this offensive line that was kind of struggling a little bit in the running side of things. So again, I would love to put them maybe, as a top 5 team, but I feel more comfortable having them at number 6 overall for my offensive line rankings going into 2025. I hope this helps you get just a little bit closer to winning your fantasy football championship in 2025. I'll see you guys again. No, hopefully you guys will see me again real soon. Until then, y'all have a blessed day.